So I've been testing out the Sony E-mount version of this lens for the past 2 weeks. And these are some of the shots I got while using this lens. They are a mix of scenes taken with the A7IV in APS-C mode and the FX30 using the full width of the sensor. Now, full disclaimer, I bought this lens with my own money and I am in no way sponsored by 7Artisans. Chapter markers are on the timeline below, so feel free to skip to whatever is relevant to you. I intentionally slowed down some of these shots because I really wanted the viewer to appreciate the image quality coming out of this lens. Now, there are a couple YouTubers that also tested this lens on a full-frame sensor, like Alexandru Don, and he seemed to have some decent results using the FX3. Although, from my testing, there are definitely some issues if you decide to use this primarily on a full-frame camera. Later in the video, I'll talk about some of the issues when using it on a full-frame sensor. Hey everyone, my name's Avi, and in today's video, we're talking about the 7Artisans 35mm T1.05 Cine Lens. Now, this is an APS-C lens, and it's built for crop sensor cameras. Did you know that I'm actually filming with that 35mm lens right now? I am going to take it off because, as you can see, that plane of focus is super thin, and if I drift too much in or out, I would basically be out of focus. So now that we have that done, let's talk about the price. This lens retails for 699 Canadian dollars before taxes here in Canada. In the US, it retails for $499 before taxes. I've also included links below for the lens, and if you do purchase by using one of these links, I will get a small commission from Amazon for the referral, and that would help me to keep this channel alive. This is considered a budget-friendly option when it comes to cinema lenses, and it's well worth the money, as you will find out after watching the video. Now, if you are planning to shoot in the daytime with that aperture wide open at T1.05, then you will need a strong ND filter. I use the ND8 to ND2000, which starts at 3 stops of reduction and goes to 11 stops of reduction. This is an additional $70 Canadian before taxes. All the links are in the comment section below. So let's talk about the technical specs and the build quality. It weighs in at a beefy 753 grams for the E-mount version, and that's roughly 1.6 pounds. So this will balance nicely on an RS3. Here it is balanced on my FX3 together with a small rig cage, the rod mount, and the focus motor. Total weight of this is 4.5 pounds, although I did have to offset the camera weight by using the mounting point here since the roll was a bit off. The Cine housing is nice, thick, and solid. The filter size is 82mm, and the iris or aperture is made up of 12 blades. It's declicked, and it ranges from T1.05 to T16. It has a 44-degree field of view, and 35mm on APS-C translates to approximately 50mm when compared to full frame. Now, just to remind everyone, it is a fully manual lens with built-in gears and has a long focus throw of 270 degrees, so you can really dial in your focus point. The focus ring feels smooth and has just the right amount of resistance. The lens size is 89.6mm by 85mm. On the far side of the focus throw, it's a little challenging to nail the focus, even when using focus peaking in camera. Here is an example of a shot that seemed to be in focus based on the information on my camera screen and the focus peaking, but at the end it was still somewhat soft. Now, this is also a result of shooting wide open at T1.05. Still, the image has some character to it. The minimum focus distance is 0.37 meters or 1.2 feet. Up next, we're going to talk about the image quality. So right off the bat, I can say that the image quality from this lens is decent. There is a softness to it that is very retro or vintage, and it has this film look to it. In the crop mode, this lens truly shines. Here it is on the A7IV in crop mode at 4K 60, and you can see that the image quality coming out of this lens is quite pleasing. So if you're shooting on the FX30, the A7IV, or the A6400 or 6500, then this can be a good entry point into a Cine Lens. It's affordable, and the 35mm focal length on APS-C is great for a wide variety of applications. Here are a couple more shots of the lens in crop mode. Now there are a couple YouTubers that also tested this lens on a full frame sensor, like Alexandru Don, and he seemed to have some decent results using the FX3. Although, from my testing, there are definitely some issues if you decide to use this primarily on a full frame camera. Here are a few samples from the FX3. When you are close to the subject, the image is beautiful, as you can see here in these shots. These look spectacular. When you focus to infinity, that's when you really reach the limits of trying to use this on a full frame sensor. You can definitely notice the vignetting on the edges of the frame, and the image circle falls apart as it gets soft and sharp at the same time. But make no mistake, this is not built for full frame. These tests were completed so you can know that on a full frame sensor you might get some really gnarly results. Now that's not always bad news, since this can be used creatively, because it gives a very distinct, swirly, dreamy look. Now if for some reason you decide to buy this lens to use it on full frame, here are a few ways that you can get around the lens effects. You can either punch in by about 10% on the image, and that would clean up the edges so the image is usable. However, you are still sacrificing the total actual resolution, although in most cases, no one may even notice the change in resolution. Another way is to use clear image zoom on the FX3. I tested it out and punched it at 1.1 times, and it cleaned up the edges to a decent amount. Doing this will maintain your 4K resolution, but now you aren't technically at that 35mm focal length. And that's in terms of the frame coverage. Still usable footage though. Lastly, you can use the letterboxes. Here I am using a ratio of 1.85 to 1, and that kind of removes the distractions from the edges. But again, that involves post-processing, and it does sacrifice or dispose of some of your image. Overall, the good news is that there are some workarounds should you decide that for some reason you want to use this lens on the full frame. Let's talk about the lens flaring. Lens flaring at certain angles can cause some distractions, but that can be fixed by either adjusting your composition or using a matte box. Either way, it's not the greatest compared to more expensive options out there. But then again, this is a budget-friendly option, and it's great at what it does, especially for the price. So if you're like me, I won't get hung up on the lens flares. I'd either just compose differently or use a matte box to block the glare. Focused breathing is much more prevalent than other lenses, and while it doesn't really bother me, do ask yourself, how often are you racking focus to another object in the scene? I'm also going to do a video later on about how to fix focus breathing for any lens on any camera, so stay tuned for that. My overall summary of this lens is that I think that it's fantastic. There's a vintage retro film look to it, and everything looks a little bit unreal and more artsy once graded properly. The 7Artisans 35mm T1.05 comes in highly recommended from me. If you are looking for an affordable Cine lens that checks all the boxes and gives a decent amount of image quality, then this might be one that you want to jump on. As I mentioned earlier, if you're shooting on the FX30, the A7IV, or the A6400 or 6500, then this can be a good entry point into Cine lenses. It's affordable, and the 35mm focal length on APS-C is great for a wide variety of applications. And now for the final thoughts on cinema glass. There is a different kind of intimacy or connection to the camera when shooting in full manual and using manual cine glass. If you have not yet shot with cine glass, I highly recommend taking a leap, because the intention behind the shot as well as the subject to composition relationship feels a lot more intense and a lot more purposeful. You shoot with much more intention since you are in full control of what the image looks like, and you are responsible for determining exactly what is in focus. And that's it for today's video. Thanks for stopping by. If you found value in this video, consider liking and subscribing, and if you have any questions, leave a comment below. See you in the next one.